How obedient are you to God's commands? People disobey God for any number of reasons. Some people disobey Him out of defiance and rebellion. Others disobey God because they just don't think or care about what God says. Some people do care of God's commands, but they disobey from lack of knowledge. They don't know all that God requires. Others know God's commands and they truly desire to obey, but they struggle because of weakness or temptation. And then there are those who disobey God because sometimes God's commands just do not make sense to them. They question whether obeying God's commands is the best course of action for them, whether it is beneficial or even necessary. Abraham demonstrated great faith in God because he obeyed God without questioning, even when it appeared, as we shall say, that he had some very good reasons to perhaps question God. Abraham's willingness to sacrifice his own son in response to God's commands is perhaps the ultimate example of faith and obedience outside of Jesus, of course, that we find in the entire Bible. So let's take a look at verse from Hebrews 11:17 and see what we can learn from Abraham's offering. Verse 17. By faith, Abraham, when God tested him, offered Isaac as a sacrifice. So, first thing we learn about faith from Abraham and Isaac is faith recognizes that God sometimes tests us. God does not approve of child sacrifice and never has. God never intended for Abraham to sacrifice Isaac. We read from the accounts of Abraham and Isaac in Genesis chapter 22, verses 1 and 2. Sometime later, God tested Abraham. He said to him, Abraham, here I am, he replied. Then God said, take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering, as one of the mountains I will tell you about. God did not intend for Abraham to actually kill his own son. God was testing Abraham to see if Abraham would obey. God was examining Abraham. Did he really love God more than anything else? Did Abraham really put God first in his life? God knew Abraham and loved Isaac dearly. In asking him to sacrifice his son, God was testing Abraham's devotion to himself and making a trial of Abraham's faith and obedience. Faith recognizes that God sometimes tests us as well. God sometimes asks us to give up that which is most dear to us in order to prove our love for Him. Why would God do that, you may wonder? God doesn't test us so that He will know what is in our heart. God tests us so that we may know what is in our heart. It is through a very test that we exercise our faith in obedience to God that our love for God becomes actual and real. In other words, without the test, we cannot truly say that we love God. God must be first in our lives, and God sometimes tests us to give us the opportunity to put Him first. When that happens, we must choose to obey God without questioning. Are you willing to put God first in your life in every realm? Be blessed.